Welcome everybody to this third day of this 10th International Symposium on Travel Demand Management and TInnGO and DIAMOND's final conference. This day we are going to have again three special sessions, but first of all we are going to start with a keynote from Doug Balmack. Malin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Francis, for that introduction, and good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be here for the final day of the conference, and also very happy to introduce Doug, which is a close colleague and friend of mine. And Doug is associate professor at Örebro University in Sweden. He's highly acclaimed and highly experienced scholar, specializing in a broad range of topics, which have also been addressed at this conference. Today, he will talk about issues of women's employment in the transport sector, which is a burning issue in and around Europe today, where innovation and new requirement strategies are badly needed. And this is exactly the topic of Doug's keynote speech today. And please, Doug, the word is yours for about 15 minutes, and then we will have a 15 minutes Q&A after your talk.
So can you see my screen now? If I do like
yes,
that?
we can see your screen.
Okay.
We don't see you, though.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why actually. But anyway, yeah. So I don't know really what to do on that mode. Well, I will anyway go ahead. So thank you all. Thank you so much, Malin, for this introduction. And many thanks for the organizers to inviting me. Very honored to have the opportunity to speak at this conference. And so this paper is called Women Truck Drivers and Future Mobile Work Towards Gender Equal Transport Futures. And it is based on an interactive research project called Trucks for All, developing norm-critical innovation at Volvo, which I did together with Susanne Andersson, Stockholm University, and Ann-Charlotte Kallerstig at Örebro University. And in this project, we work closely with Volvo to develop norm-critical innovation, as it's called, among other things, focusing on users and innovation. So the aim was to increase awareness of how norms influence innovation processes, with the goal to contribute to make transport sector more inclusive and gender equal. So this project links with what Glenn talked about the other day in his keynote, the first keynote for this conference, namely the importance of making visible women's experiences and engage white male engineers to make the transport sector more inclusive. So to begin with, what is norm critique? So in recent years, there's been a growing recognition of how services and products sometimes suit only some groups while excluding others. And this has been discussed at this conference with regard to smart mobilities, for example. And this makes it important to address implicit and often unaware social norms about users that designers and engineers have, and to increase their ability to detect and reflect upon social norms related to users in the innovation processes. So norm critical refers to the analytical process of detecting and deconstructing norms. And norm reflexivity refers to the process of reasoning about the impact of norms and the consequences that different norms might have for the outcomes in terms of inclusive, excluding innovation. So the goal with applying such a norm critical methodology is to visualize implicit taken for granted norms in the haulage business and co-create tools for change. So the haulage business has traditionally been and still is very male dominated, as we know. So in Sweden, now for its high levels of gender equality, I think around 93% of drivers are men. Trucking is typically portrayed as embedded in a masculine culture associated with a dirty job, dangerous and heavy job. But it is also an image under change. So current understandings of trucking is a profession with high demands on being service-minded, with high degree of independence and responsibility. So this is also an opportunity for change. Today we see more and more young women taking up training to become professional drivers in Sweden, for example. But nevertheless, masculinity remains a key concern for hiring and keeping women in the business. And this is just an example. In the survey of women transport workers published last year, the European Transport Workers Federation clearly states that masculine culture in the workplace, including discrimination and harassment, are main challenges to women transport workers. One primary causes for women's low participation in the transport sector. However, future transport innovations, such as more autonomous vehicles, are often imagined to sort of solve some of the current problems, including driver shortage. So with the advent of autonomous, electrified and connected vehicles or mobilities, we may anticipate that fewer drivers will be needed. But with that, we also need to think about how power and control over vehicles and transport systems is being reassigned from the driver's seat to the system developers, the designers and the engineers. These are industries and sectors typically dominated by certain men and certain forms of masculinities. So this makes it even more important to engage what we talked about as white male designers and engineers at Volvo to make the transport sector more inclusive. So moving on now to what we did in this project. It is a case study that I'm referring to, so it's not a huge project, I must say. But anyway, some of its findings, tools, and what was raised in the workshops I will share now, and what we did, so to speak. Okay, so for Volvo, it was common to interview drivers, often male drivers, about their driver experiences and use these data to develop personas, and that is driver archetypes, and use them as models for developing trucks. So we used, in this project, we asked the same questions that Volvo used, but with additional gender-sensitive questions about bodily integrity, safety, and how the informers dealt with masculine work culture. So this way, we wanted to make visible women's non-normative experiences and their coping strategies. So the sample was around 7 women and 5 men, all working in the Swedish haulage business, representing different driving experiences from local and regional drivers, and also to some extent, so-called unexpected drivers, such as horse carriage drivers. So we built on these insights to develop norm-reflexive tools, and all this was tested in what we call a future workshop, where we utilized potentially norm-breaking technological innovations, in this case, an electrical garbage truck as a case, to inspire workshop participants to develop personas beyond the male norm. So some interview themes were more clearly gendered in the interviews, foremost related to hygiene, personal safety, and dealing with macho culture. So one of the interviewed men said, some are having problems with it, unfortunately, the macho culture. Many younger women have quitted, and I have met men who indicates that women are not up for the job. This is more often drivers who says this, to a lesser extent owners. They, the men, makes sure the women do not stay for long. So to claim their space as women drivers, you have to cope with macho culture. Those who complain can be positioned as less capable, as complaining too much, and being in the wrong place. However, we also have examples of great support from managers in not accepting the so-called macho culture. One of the women we interviewed said, if people misbehave, then I'm out of there. My boss supports me on this. So for this informant, to have the explicit support from managers meant she could stand up for herself without putting a job at risk. So personal safety was also a topic in the interviews. So here is Vera describing an everyday situation where she fills up gas at a truck stop as potentially threatening. Each time we stopped to fill up gas, everybody checks you out and gives you stares. It is common to be like that. I look down into the ground. I don't look at anybody because then it becomes too much. So Vera describes how women truck drivers become sort of hyper visible and attracting unwanted visibility. Her strategy is to look down, and by doing so, make her visibility manageable. And also strategies for safety is also something that is shared in online communities. For example, that you should not reveal you are alone in the truck if you are a woman driver. For example, when stopping to rest at truck stops, you move out of the cabin using the passenger side and not the driver's side to make people believe you are a co-passenger to a male driver. So by sharing advice in women-only Facebook groups, women truck drivers build up a sort of shared strategies based on their previous experiences in how to increase their personal safety. So many of the interviews, the women interviews, describe how they wish for a more secure parking places, and that overnight transfers is something that was very much of a non-option because of safety reasons. And previous studies have also discussed the crisis of mobility work in relation to what is called a politics of sanitation affecting the life of truck drivers negatively. That is Gregson in an article from 2018. For example, Desiree either avoided drinking too much water to prevent having to go to the restroom or planned when and where she may encounter a clean enough toilet to use when visiting loading docks. So she says that sometimes I go to the toilet in the morning and then I have to hold myself until 4:30 p.m. And Desiree describes how she uses baby wipes for personal cleaning, and this way she did not have to embark the trucks at truck stops she considered dirty and unsafe. So these are just examples of what we found in the interviews, and also it is results that form the basis for developing norm-reflexive tools in our project. So we did this by gendering already existing tools that were used in the Volvo organization, such as the identification of so-called pain points. And gendered pain points are based on user experiences that can be explained by gender, and that is likely to produce specific gendered problem areas for women drivers. And these are illustrated as experiences of exclusion, feeling out of place, lack of personal safety, harassments, problems taking care of personal hygiene, and so on. But we also wanted to emphasize women's pleasure points, namely women's positive experiences from trucking, their pleasures in mastering the trucks, including their experiences of freedom and pride in being part of a masculine trucker culture. So we brought these tools and insights to a future workshop where designers and engineers started developing new personas based on an electromobility garbage truck. So one of the key questions for this project was if future trucks were developed with future or current users in mind. And most often the answer was that future trucks were designed based on assumptions about the current male modern driver. So for the future workshop, the engineers and designers had to ask themselves how technological innovations would open up for new user groups. And if so, who are they? What does a social composition look like? What needs do future users got, like socially, bodily, technical? And how will truck competences and professions change due to electrification? Will gender patterns and other norms governing who is the typical user change? And if so, in what ways? So to spur the discussions, we asked them to consider questions related to sort of body and health, hygiene, social relation factors, all these things that came up in the interviews. And we also developed what we called so-called alternative personas based on the interviews with the women to spur the discussions further and create empathy for non-normative drivers. Here is one based on interviews we did with horse carriage drivers, the so-called unexpected driver, usually not recognized as a traditional truck driver. And here we also specify so-called pain and pleasure points we found important in their narratives. So the workshop generated some ideas on how to solve gendered pain points addressed in the interviews. For example, the truck company was suggested to build networks of safe charging stops for electrical vehicles, offering safe places to rest, train, and exercise for drivers. However, issues such as harassment and other gender problems that women drivers faces today was considered out of the scope for what the engineers could do something about. However, they did consider future trucks as high-tech vehicles with a specific pull factor for women. So the workshop resulted in several female user personas being suggested, where users were imagined to be high-skilled logistical experts, an early adapter who inspired to work with trendy, intelligent, environmentally friendly trucks. And the new technology was anticipated to facilitate these needs. And the trucks and the users was considered part of sort of a greater system of intelligent trucks and intelligent trash bins who sort of communicated between themselves, with the truck moving around and collecting full trash bins that sort of emptied themselves automatically to the truck, making sort of garbage trucking a clean job. And garbage tracking, as we know, was then transformed in this workshop. From being dirty, heavy, dangerous, and masculine work we associate with garbage trucking today to something high-tech, hip, and environmentally friendly, made suitable for a high-skilled female user with an interest in sustainable technology. So, last slide. To change constraining gender norms is not easy, and it takes a long time. So in this presentation, I've touched upon issues that hinders women to take up the occupation as truck driver, and also shared how engineers and designers can be enrolled in potentially changing some parts of the future mobile work to become more inclusive and gender equal. So in this project, we have emphasized that change towards more gender equal transport futures requires that and that this is evident, I must say, to include women's perspectives and needs, and that make sure these are included in technology shifts and design processes, as has been touched upon in this conference by many speakers. So to achieve this, we have worked to increase engineers and designers' awareness and understanding of how norms related to gender, including age, ethnic origin, and bodily abilities affect user experiences. And we have urged them to consider future user needs when developing future trucks. So for us, norm-reflexive methodology made women's experiences visible, and hopefully norm reflexivity can be a way forward to achieve a more gender equal transport future, where women's participation is considered entitled and normal, as opposed to special and other compared to men. So to engage white male engineers in large trucking manufacturers to become more norm-reflexive is perhaps one way of achieving this goal. Right, that was it. See if I can stop sharing.
Thank you, Doug. That was really interesting and inspiring to hear about your work with truck drivers in the transport sector. We now have a couple of minutes for questions. So if anyone have questions for Doug, please type them in the chat, and I will read them aloud to Doug. But I can start with a question, Doug. You mentioned in, yeah?
I would like to take the opportunity to ask if Doug could turn his camera on. Let's try, Doug. We are going to send you an invite to turn your camera on, and let's see if it works. Because it's a pity not having the opportunity to see you.
Yeah, so they can click on a small circle icon underneath. Yeah, Aria, yeah, I tried that. It doesn't work. I will share my webcam. Okay, so.
But, do you have two screens?
Yeah, I got two. I see Marlin and you. Yeah.
No, I mean if you have two screens connected to your computer.
No, just one. Sorry.
No.
Yeah.
And do you have your a camera on your computer, of course?
Yeah, it's on, and I also checked it before that it should be working, and it did work before, so I'm not sure why.
It actually looked like your camera were on, but somehow we just got a blank image. Okay. But actually, we don't have a lot of time now. So I will just I mean, we hear you anyway, Doug.
Good, good. I
So
look the
that's
same,
good.
I can, by the way, yeah.
And we actually have one question here from Andre Woodcock, who says that it is interesting to note that there has been a technological pull for women in the industry. Do you think that this could be a follow-through in other transport areas too?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that technology is here sort of turned into a pull factor for women, because and I think it can be in other areas as well, and it's certainly so with regards to sort of IT and so on. It has different meanings in different parts of the world, so it's definitely something that is culturally a cultural social thing. And here, I mean, in terms of Volvo, they were very much engaging with the environmental aspects, and that users could be doing something else and use this truck as a tool for more of a technical career or something like that. It was not just doing the job as a driver. It was so much more associated with it than that. So sure, if we can sort of, and also flexibility was associated with this new technology. I can actually program it in order to sort of facilitate a sort of a more flexible work-life balance according to these imaginaries about future work as a garbage trucker. So definitely it could be used in other areas as well.
Thank you. Andre also says that we always hear that women are put off by technology. So looking at the empowerment and the profession is good from that perspective. We have time for a short question from Maria Chiara Leva. And she says that she talked to a talent manager from a rail service provider in Ireland, and they organize specific hiring campaign and training program to include more women from their graduate and apprenticeship entry points. So is this also done in the company you have approached?
Yeah, they do all sorts of outreach arrangements at schools and so on. So yeah, definitely, they very much engage in sort of changing the norm on what a typical engineer look like. But still, that norm is still very stable, and sort of a family father from Gothenburg working at Volvo, educated at Chalmers Technical University. That is very, very stable, but they do work a lot with changing that, and hopefully that will bear fruit in the future.
Okay, thanks. And I have a final comment. You talked a little bit about macho culture and the need to change that. And today it is the International Day for Men, actually. Do you think you have, in relation to masculinity and given the special day today, do you have any messages for those who work with these issues?
Well, I can only say I didn't know it was this special day. Well, I heard about it, but anyway, I'm just very glad that in this case we work together with Volvo, and we haven't met any resistance or anything like that from the company itself. So they're very keen to learn, and I must say that is, yeah, it was somewhat surprising, given that there's so much resistance towards gender studies and sort of the gender perspective and so on. And the project itself raised a lot of debate in Swedish media when it was launched, even though it's a very tiny project compared to, you know, TInnGO DIAMOND. It was sort of made into, okay, so now gender scholars will go to Volvo and create some kind of pink women's truck, you know. And that wasn't the quest here. We wanted to raise issues around norms, and I think it's considered for many sort of male-dominated tech industries. It is considered a survival issue to learn about these things and how norms around masculinity affect the ability to attract and keep women staff. So that is very much. Yeah, keep up the interest and the good work, I would say.
Well, thank you, Doug. I think
Thanks.
that's the time we have for Q&A today, but it's a really inspiring presentation, and we will follow the work that you are doing.
Thank you.
Thanks.